The wife who stabbed 193 times. The chilling case of Susan Wright. There are crimes that seem born of madness, sudden, uncontrollable fits of rage. And then there are those that linger on the edge of obsession, fueled by fear, humiliation, and quiet desperation. The story of Susan Wright, a suburban mother from Houston, Texas, is one that still divides America. A tale of love, betrayal, and a night that turned into one of the most brutal acts of domestic homicide in modern history. It was January 2003. The Wright family, Susan, her husband Jeff, and their two young children, lived in a modest home in a quiet Houston neighborhood. To outsiders, they looked like the picture of middle-class stability. She was a 26-year-old stay-at-home mom, soft-spoken and polite. He was a 34-year-old carpet salesman, outgoing, a little rough around the edges, but hard-working. Yet behind closed doors, something was deeply wrong. Susan later told the court that Jeff was violent, that he hit her, that he screamed, cursed, and sometimes forced himself on her. Her family claimed they'd noticed bruises but didn't want to interfere. Her defense attorney would later paint her as a woman pushed to the edge, a battered wife whose quiet endurance eventually broke. On the night of January 13, 2003, Susan said her husband came home high on cocaine and angry. The children were asleep. What happened next would become the centerpiece of one of Texas's most shocking trials. According to prosecutors, Susan lured Jeff into bed under the pretense of intimacy. Candles flickering, the sheets turned down, soft music playing. But this wasn't romance. This was the setup for a murder so violent, so excessive, it stunned even veteran detectives. Once Jeff was restrained, wrists and ankles tied to the bedposts, Susan retrieved a knife from the kitchen. And then, in what prosecutors would later describe as a storm of rage, she stabbed him 193 times. The autopsy was grisly, dozens of wounds to the chest, neck, arms, and face. Some experts believe Jeff had been conscious for much of it. Afterward, Susan dragged his body out of the bedroom, down the hallway, and into the backyard. It took her hours. She dug a shallow grave under the freshly built doghouse, a macabre detail that would haunt the trial. For the next several days, she told friends and family that Jeff had gone away on business. She even called his workplace to say he wouldn't be in. But the facade didn't last. A week later, with suspicions mounting, she broke down. Her lawyer contacted police, and detectives uncovered Jeff's body, still tied to the bedsheets. At trial, the prosecution presented Susan as cold, calculating, and manipulative. They said the murder was premeditated, that she wanted to cash in on a $200,000 life insurance policy and be rid of a controlling husband. Her calm demeanor during police interviews, they claimed, was that of a woman rehearsed, not traumatized. The defense, led by Neil Davis, countered with a chilling portrait of domestic abuse. They brought Susan to the stand, a move considered risky but ultimately powerful. Her voice trembled as she described years of violence, sexual assault, and fear. She claimed that on that night, when Jeff pinned her down, something inside her snapped. In one of the most dramatic courtroom moments in Texas history, the defense recreated the murder scene in full. They brought in the actual bed, complete with ropes and mock candles. Susan was asked to demonstrate how she had tied Jeff's wrists. Some jurors wept, others looked away. The media called it the most theatrical defense in years. But even that wasn't enough to erase the brutality of the crime. 193 stab wounds. The jury couldn't ignore the excess, the rage that went far beyond self-defense. After 5.5 hours of deliberation, they found Susan Wright guilty of murder. In March 2004, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Yet her story didn't end there. In 2009, after appeals and questions about the fairness of her original trial, her conviction was overturned, and she was granted a new sentencing hearing. The new jury, hearing the same facts but in a calmer courtroom, reduced her sentence to 20 years. She served nearly 17 years before being released on parole in December 2020. Today, Susan Wright walks free, a woman who insists she was a victim before she became a killer. But the question remains, was she truly a battered wife pushed past her limit, or a manipulative murderer who found the perfect cover in claiming abuse? Psychologists who reviewed the case have offered conflicting opinions. Some argue that the sheer number of stab wounds points to dissociation, a red haze moment in which control is lost completely. Others say it's the hallmark of revenge, not fear. When someone stabs 193 times, one expert said, that's not about defense, that's about annihilation. The public remains divided. Many saw Susan as the embodiment of hidden domestic horror, a woman smiling through bruises, cooking dinner while secretly plotting her escape. Others saw her as a femme fatale in suburban disguise, calm, methodical, and cold-blooded. In the years since her release, she's avoided public life. No interviews, no memoirs, no attempts to reclaim the spotlight. But the case has become a staple of true crime television, dissected in documentaries and podcasts alike. The image of that white bed, the candles, the knife, the sheer unimaginable violence, it all endures as one of the darkest examples of what love can curdle into behind closed doors. And perhaps that's what still chills people about the Susan Wright case. It wasn't a stranger in the dark. It wasn't a burglary gone wrong. It was a young mother in her own home, turning the place meant to be safest, the marriage bed, into a killing ground. Some say she was fighting back. Others say she simply lost control. But either way, it's a reminder that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles sweetly, says, "I love you." And then, when the candles flicker, it reaches for the knife. The antifreeze killer. The chilling case of Stacy Costa. There's something particularly sinister about poison. It's quiet. It doesn't scream or bleed or draw attention. It hides behind a smile, a glass, a meal. And few modern killers embodied that cold precision better than Stacy Costa, a suburban mother from upstate New York who turned antifreeze, deception, and her own daughter into weapons. This is the story of a woman who almost got away with 2 murders and 1 attempted third, using nothing more than a household chemical and a cruel imagination. Stacy Costa seemed, at first glance, like an ordinary woman. She worked hard, raised her 2 daughters, and lived in a modest home in the Syracuse area. But beneath that surface was a manipulative brilliance, the ability to control, to lie, and to stage an entire crime scene as though it were theater. Her first husband, Michael Wallace, died in 2000 at the age of 38. He had been sick for months. Muscle weakness, confusion, breathing trouble. But doctors couldn't pinpoint the cause. They called it a heart attack. Stacy was heartbroken, or so it seemed. She buried him quickly, no autopsy. Life went on, She remarried in 2003 to David Castor, a local businessman. By all appearances, they were happy. But just 2 years later, in August 2005, David was found dead, slumped over in their bedroom, a glass of green liquid nearby, and a bottle of antifreeze close to his hand. Police found Stacy crying hysterically. She told them David had been depressed after an argument and had taken his own life by drinking the antifreeze. Her story fit, at least at first. The word antifreeze would soon become infamous. During the initial investigation, detectives noticed small oddities. The glass didn't have David's fingerprints. The turkey baster in the kitchen sink did, and it contained traces of antifreeze. Even stranger, David's DNA was found inside the turkey baster.
Stacy's explanation? He must have used it to commit suicide.
Investigators didn't buy it. When police reviewed the timeline, they realized something darker. Stacy had called 911 only after waiting 4 days, claiming she didn't want to disturb her husband's rest. And then, in what seemed like an act of panic, she ordered his body cremated immediately. It might have worked if she hadn't made one fatal mistake. When detectives obtained a court order to exhume Michael Wallace's body, her first husband, they found the same substance in his tissue, ethylene glycol, the main ingredient in antifreeze. Stacy had poisoned him too. But even that wasn't enough to catch her, not yet. Realizing the police were closing in, Stacy devised one of the coldest, most calculated plans in true crime history. She decided to frame her own daughter, Ashley. In August 2007, as suspicion mounted, Stacy invited her daughter to have drinks with her, to relax. She mixed Ashley's drinks with vodka and sleeping pills. The next day, Ashley was found unconscious in her bed, next to a handwritten suicide note confessing to both murders, her father's and stepfather's. But Ashley survived. When police arrived, the scene looked staged, and it was. Handwriting analysis later proved the letter was Stacy's, not Ashley's. The confession was fake. Detectives had enough. They arrested Stacy Castor in 2007 and charged her with second-degree murder, attempted murder, and forgery. The trial in 2009 captivated the nation. The prosecution called her the Black Widow of upstate New York. They laid out a story of control and greed. Stacy wanted life insurance payouts and total control over her narrative. When her first husband began to annoy her, gone. When her second husband argued about finances, gone. And when the police started connecting the dots, she tried to erase the last witness who could expose her, her own daughter. The evidence was overwhelming.
Chemical tests?
Witness statements, the forged note, the turkey baster. It was like something out of a twisted domestic thriller. But perhaps the most haunting moment came when Ashley herself testified. Weak, trembling, and still recovering, she faced her mother across the courtroom and said, "You killed my dad. You killed David. And you tried to kill me." Stacy never flinched. Her defense claimed she was being framed by overzealous detectives. But no one believed it. The jury took just a few days to find her guilty on all major counts. In March 2009, she was sentenced to 51 years to life in prison. The judge called her the most cold-blooded person he'd ever seen. Psychologists have since dissected her personality. She wasn't impulsive like other killers. She was methodical, calculating. She preferred a slow death, one she could watch unfold. She wanted control, to play the grieving widow, to manipulate sympathy, to make everyone else believe her story. Even in prison, she refused to take responsibility. She insisted Ashley had been lying, that she was innocent, that the real killer was still out there. But no one believed her. In 2016, while serving her sentence at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, Stacey Castor was found dead in her cell at age 48. The cause was ruled natural, a heart attack. Ironically, the woman who had used poison to destroy others died alone, behind bars, of her own failing heart. The legacy of Stacey Castor endures because her crimes crossed a boundary even among killers, the betrayal of motherhood itself. To use antifreeze as a weapon is monstrous enough. To turn it against your own child is almost inhuman. She wanted to erase her past, and when that wasn't enough, she tried to rewrite it in her daughter's handwriting. Today, the story of Stacey Castor stands as one of the most chilling portraits of manipulation in American crime. A reminder that evil can sometimes sound calm. Sip from a wine glass and say, "Here, sweetheart, just one more drink." Love, luxury, and murder. The Monica Cementilli story. In the sun-soaked hills of Los Angeles, surrounded by luxury cars and perfect lawns, no one would have guessed a brutal murder was being planned behind the walls of a multi-million-dollar mansion. But in 2017, the world of hair care royalty and Beverly Hills glamour came crashing down when Monica Cementilli, the poised wife of a successful beauty executive, was accused of masterminding her husband's cold-blooded murder for love, lust, and money. This isn't a story of passion gone wrong. It's a story of calculated betrayal, greed, and a crime so meticulous it looked almost professional. Almost. The victim was Fabio Cementilli, a beloved executive at Wella, one of the biggest names in the hair industry. Known affectionately as Big Daddy in beauty circles, Fabio was a man who built his career from the ground up. He was charming, generous, and adored by colleagues around the world. To outsiders, Fabio and Monica were a power couple, wealthy, glamorous, and seemingly in love after nearly 3 decades of marriage. But behind the closed doors of their West Hills mansion, something darker had been growing. Monica, now in her late 40s, had become restless. Her life, filled with money and status, lacked something else: excitement. And that excitement came in the form of Robert Baker, a 44-year-old lover with a criminal past. Baker wasn't just any fling. He was a former professional boxer turned small-time hustler who Monica met years earlier. Their relationship reignited in secret. They met in hotels, exchanged messages, and built a fantasy together. One where Fabio was out of the picture and Monica could live freely with love, wealth, and a new beginning. But to make that fantasy real, Fabio had to die. On January 23, 2017, Fabio was found sprawled near the backyard pool, blood pooling beneath him, his face partially covered by a motorcycle helmet. He had been stabbed 7 times, 2 wounds to the neck, swift, deliberate, deadly. At first, police thought it was a home invasion gone wrong. Fabio's black Porsche 911 was missing, and drawers inside the house appeared ransacked. But investigators quickly noticed something odd. There were no signs of forced entry, and valuable items were untouched. Whoever did this knew the house, and knew Fabio would be home that afternoon. For months, the murder baffled detectives. Monica played the grieving widow perfectly. She cried, posted emotional tributes, and appeared heartbroken at the funeral. But behind the scenes, she was cashing in a $1.6 million life insurance policy and continuing her secret relationship with Baker. Detectives dug deeper. Security footage showed Baker's car circling the neighborhood that day. DNA evidence from under Fabio's fingernails matched Baker's. And cell phone records placed Monica and Baker in contact hundreds of times leading up to the murder, and even on the day itself. The evidence was chillingly clear. The two lovers had planned the killing together. In May 2019, Monica and Baker were both arrested. Prosecutors painted Monica as the mastermind, a cold, manipulative woman who used Baker to do her dirty work. They argued that she lured him into the fantasy with promises of a shared life and Fabio's fortune. Their plan was cinematic in its cruelty. Monica made sure her husband was home alone. Baker entered the house, ambushed Fabio, and stabbed him repeatedly. Then he drove off in Fabio's Porsche to make it look like a robbery, abandoning the car miles away. Forensic analysts called it a classic domestic setup, a fake burglary to hide a personal motive. But the deeper investigators looked, the uglier it got. Texts between Monica and Baker revealed a toxic mix of obsession and entitlement. She wrote about how tired she was of living in a lie, about wanting to be free. In return, Baker sent her messages of devotion and rage, promising he'd take care of things once and for all. This wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated, precise, and fueled by greed. When prosecutors finally confronted Monica in court, her defense team tried to paint her as manipulated, claiming Baker had acted alone, that she'd been used. But the jury didn't buy it. In 2023, Monica Cementilli was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Her lover, Robert Baker, was also convicted. Both faced life in prison without parole. The sentence brought a sense of justice, but not peace. Fabio's family, devastated, furious, called her betrayal beyond comprehension. His sister said in court, Fabio gave her everything, his heart, his trust, his life, and she gave him a death sentence. The psychology of Monica's crime fascinates experts to this day. She wasn't desperate, poor, or abused. She had everything: wealth, family, and a loving husband adored by millions in the beauty world. So why? Some believe it was the thrill, the intoxicating idea of control after years of feeling unseen. Others say it was greed, plain and simple. A woman who couldn't let go of luxury, but wanted the freedom of passion. Whatever her true motive, one fact remains. She planned a murder that shattered the illusion of her perfect life and exposed the monstrous side of human desire, hiding behind designer clothes and perfect smiles. When detectives were asked what made this case so haunting, one replied, because she didn't have to do it. She had every reason to walk away, and instead, she chose to destroy everything. And that's the twisted tragedy of Monica Cementilli, a woman who mistook love for possession, comfort for imprisonment, and freedom for murder. The Black Widow of Iran, the case of Kulthum Akbari. In the quiet northern province of Mazandaran, Iran, amidst rice paddies, old houses, and the whispering sea breeze, a chilling pattern went unnoticed for 2 decades. A woman who appeared polite, unassuming, even venerable, quietly married older men, and one by one, they died. Their deaths were ruled natural causes or complications, the kind of misfortune that befalls aging men. But gradually, suspicion built. This is the story of Kulthum Akbari, accused of murdering 11 husbands over 20 years, using poison, manipulation, and the perfect camouflage of respectability. Born in 1967 in Malakabade Bala, Mazandaran, Kulthum's early life was unremarkable. What would become remarkable was her pattern of marriages and deaths. According to court documents, she entered some 19 formal marriages and 18 temporary sihe unions, many with men decades older. She presented herself as the caring wife, the companion for a lonely older man, a stabilizing presence. Yet her true motive, prosecutors say, was calculated: the acquisition of wealth, property, and the silence of victims who died naturally. Beginning around 2001, her marriages took on a sinister pattern. Each time she married or entered a union with an older man who lived alone, seemed vulnerable, and carried assets. Within months, his health would decline. Liver failure, sudden heart trouble, unexplained collapse. Initial death certificates cited age or chronic illness. Few thought to look deeper. But investigators later uncovered that Kulthum had used sedatives, diabetes medications, industrial alcohol, and mix-ups of drugs to slowly poison her victims, making each death appear plausible. What allowed her to operate for so long were systemic blind spots. Investigations of elderly deaths rarely involved toxicology. Family members accepted natural causes, and the pattern was geographically scattered across cities like Sari, Nika, Babol, and Kayam Shar. Her victims' ages ranged, and the time between marriage and death was suspiciously short, sometimes only weeks or months. Her most recent arrest in September 2023 was triggered when her 82-year-old husband grew suspicious. The family recognized Kulthum's name and alerted police. Under questioning, she confessed to 11 murders and 1 attempted murder, though she claims she had lost count. The indictment charged her with 11 counts of premeditated murder. Investigators estimated her total number of victims could exceed 20. During the trial, prosecutors described Kulthum as methodical and chillingly calm. She had carefully selected vulnerable men, gained access to their medications, manipulated their routines, and ensured their deaths looked natural. One surviving victim told police he became suspicious after tasting sweetened syrup and feeling faint. He threw it out and refused to press charges. The properties and dowries of deceased husbands frequently ended up in the name of her daughter or held by her family. A clear transfer of assets following death. The court in Mazandaran sentenced her in September 2025 to 10 death penalties plus a 10-year prison sentence for attempted murder. 10 families demanded qisas, retribution equal to the crime. 1 family accepted blood money. The verdict stands as one of the most dramatic female serial killer convictions in Iranian legal history. The psychology behind Kulthum's crimes is particularly unsettling. Psychologists call this instrumental homicide, motivated not by rage but by gain, control, and manipulation. She wasn't impulsive, she was strategic. Her victims were selected, evaluated, and eliminated in a process that mirrored business planning more than crime of passion. Her ability to maintain a normal public persona while orchestrating death reveals the dark side of domestic trust. In Iranian society, elderly male spouses are expected to be cared for by wives, not targeted. That expectation helped her hide in plain sight. Forensic experts later concluded that what prevented detection were assumptions. Older men died, wives grieved. It took the latest case and cross-referencing of patterns to break the facade. The societal response has been one of shock and introspection. As media dubbed her the Black Widow, families of victims spoke of betrayal and outrage. Many said they trusted her. Many said their loved ones died thinking they had chosen companionship. They never imagined the companion would become the killer. Deadly Valentine, the Corey Richens case. In the quiet suburbs of Utah, life seems ordinary. Neatly trimmed lawns, children playing in driveways, neighbors waving across the street. It's a place where everyone knows everyone, where secrets are supposed to be safe behind closed doors. Yet, in 2022, one house would reveal that evil can hide beneath the most innocuous veneer, even behind the smile of a children's author. This is the chilling story of Corey Richens, a woman whose ambitions, secrets, and alleged crimes would shock her community and the nation. Corey Richens wasn't your typical criminal profile. She was a published author of children's books, known in her town for creativity, charm, and a seemingly caring demeanor. Her stories spoke of wonder, courage, and the triumph of good over evil, ironically mirroring the darkness that would later unfold in her own life. She was married to Eric Richens, a man described by friends as gentle, dedicated, and unsuspecting. Their marriage had appeared normal, even happy, at least to outsiders. Friends would later remark that they were the perfect couple, posting happy family photos and attending community events together. But as with so many domestic crimes, appearances were deceiving. March 2022 would become the turning point. On Valentine's Day, what should have been a day of love and celebration reportedly turned into a nightmare. Eric fell ill suddenly, severe nausea, dizziness, and eventual collapse. At first, doctors and family suspected a virus or a bad meal. But over the following weeks, more strange symptoms appeared. Neurological issues, confusion, and heart irregularities that could not be easily explained. Medical investigators would later determine that Eric had been exposed to a powerful opioid, fentanyl, a substance capable of causing death in microgram doses. The timing was particularly chilling. According to court records, Corey had allegedly used the day of love to orchestrate her attack. The dose had been small enough to avoid immediate detection, but enough to bring Eric to the brink of death. This was no accident. Authorities began their investigation when a pattern emerged. Suspicious illnesses, unexplained prescriptions, and a timeline of strange hospital visits. Interviews revealed that Corey had exhibited unusual interest in her husband's medications and health records. Friends mentioned she was unusually controlling, often pressuring Eric to take or avoid certain medications under the guise of care. The investigation expanded when evidence surfaced that the alleged attempt wasn't isolated. Police obtained records showing prior attempts to manipulate Eric's health. Forensic toxicology confirmed the presence of fentanyl in his system, and the pattern suggested intentional poisoning. Corey, a mother and a published author, now became the prime suspect. The motive, prosecutors argued, was multi-layered. Financial gain was one angle, insurance policies, potential inheritances, and control over assets. But there was also a psychological component. Investigators described Corey as exhibiting signs of narcissistic behavior, a desire for control, manipulation of those around her, and a need to maintain the facade of a perfect life, even at extreme costs. Court documents revealed chilling details. Corey allegedly planned meticulously, researching dosages, timing, and methods to avoid detection. She understood the medical system well enough to exploit its gaps. Her knowledge of her husband's routines allowed her to strike when the risk of being caught seemed minimal. Friends later described her as calm, composed, and sometimes eerily detached, even when discussing her husband's health crises. When the case reached trial, it gripped the public. How could a woman who wrote tales of kindness and empathy be capable of trying to end the life of her spouse? The media dubbed her the children's author who poisoned love, highlighting the stark contrast between her professional image and her alleged criminal actions. Witnesses testified to Corey's meticulous planning. Emails, text messages, and hospital records were entered into evidence, painting a picture of a calculated individual who had spent months, if not years, manipulating her husband's environment. Prosecutors argued that this wasn't a crime of passion, but a premeditated act designed to achieve ultimate control over Eric's life and the couple's shared wealth. Defense attorneys argued otherwise, claiming Corey was being unfairly portrayed and that her husband's health issues could have alternative explanations. They tried to frame the allegations as circumstantial, emphasizing her role as a devoted wife and mother. But the evidence was persuasive. The combination of toxicology, timing, and her involvement in Eric's medication management created a compelling narrative for the prosecution. The psychological profile of Corey Richins is as fascinating as it is disturbing. Experts noted that she exhibited hallmarks of calculated manipulation, a cold detachment from the suffering of others, and a meticulous attention to planning. Unlike spontaneous killers driven by emotion, Corey allegedly executed her plans with patience, aiming to avoid detection while maximizing her control over the outcome. Her story has since become a case study in criminal psychology. How someone who appears outwardly normal, even nurturing, can hide a capacity for harm. How intimate knowledge of a victim's life, daily routines, medical needs, personal habits, can become a weapon in the hands of someone with intent. As of now, Corey Richins faces multiple charges, including attempted murder, poisoning, and child endangerment. The case remains under intense scrutiny, and her trial has drawn widespread media attention, partly because of the unusual combination of domestic crime, medical knowledge, and public persona. The aftermath of the case leaves an unsettling question. How do we recognize evil when it hides behind the ordinary? Corey's ability to balance public appearances with clandestine plotting underscores the frightening truth that some people can commit horrifying acts without leaving obvious traces, at least until the evidence becomes undeniable. In the small Utah community, neighbors remain shocked. Children who read her books are learning lessons of morality and kindness, unaware of the dark reality behind their author's life. Family members of Eric Richins struggle with betrayal and grief, questioning how a spouse could so meticulously plan to destroy someone they claimed to love. Psychologists emphasize that Corey's case is a cautionary tale. Domestic settings, appearances, and normalcy are not guarantees of safety. The capacity for harm can hide in plain sight, masked by charm, creativity, and the routines of everyday life. Ultimately, the story of Corey Richins is a chilling reflection on trust, ambition, and the length some individuals will go to achieve control. It is a modern-day Black Widow tale, reminding us that even in peaceful neighborhoods, danger can lurk quietly, disguised behind smiles, books, and the most unassuming gestures of love. Her alleged crimes continue to captivate and horrify because they combine deception, calculation, and betrayal on a deeply intimate level, proving once again that true evil often wears the mask of ordinary life. The wife who tried to hire a hitman, the deceptive case of Dalia Dippolito. If there were ever a crime that felt written for television, this was it, except it was horrifyingly real. A beautiful Florida wife, a husband who never saw it coming, a murder-for-hire plot that unfolded on camera. And when police decided to flip the script on her, she walked straight into their trap. Every step caught on film. This is the true story of Dalia Dippolito, a Boca Raton housewife who thought she could plan the perfect murder, only to find herself starring in a real-life police sting that shocked America. It all began in 2009. Dalia was 26, glamorous, confident, and newly married to Michael Dippolito, a 38-year-old man who'd turned his life around after a stint in fraud and probation. They had met just months earlier in a blur of romance and impulsive decisions. Within weeks, they were married. To the outside world, they looked like a stylish Florida couple, driving a BMW, living in a nice townhouse, posting photos of their happy life. But behind that polished image, Dalia had other plans. Prosecutors later described her as addicted to money and manipulation. Not content with the comfortable life she already had, she wanted more. Michael's house, his bank accounts, and his freedom, all without him in the way. So she decided to make him disappear. Dalia first tried subtle tactics. She secretly planted drugs in Michael's car, then called police, hoping he'd be arrested and sent back to prison. The plan failed. Officers found nothing credible. So she moved on to something darker. Through an acquaintance, she tried to hire a hitman to kill her husband. What she didn't know was that the man she'd approached was an undercover police officer. Detectives with the Boynton Beach Police Department decided to set up a sting operation, one of the most elaborate in Florida history. They wired a car with hidden cameras and arranged a meeting between Dalia and the hitman, who was actually a cop named Officer Whitey Jean. The footage they captured became infamous. In the video, Dalia sits calmly in the passenger seat, wearing large sunglasses, her voice steady and casual. The officer asks, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Without hesitation, she says, "I'm positive. I'm 5,000% sure." She tells him her husband will be home the next morning. She provides the address, the layout, even the time of day when Michael would still be in bed. She agrees to pay $7,000 in cash. She laughs nervously, but never wavers. When it happens, she adds, "I'll be at the gym. I need to look like I didn't know anything." The officer nods. The trap is set. The next morning, as planned, the police staged an entire fake crime scene outside the Dippolito townhouse. They covered the area with yellow tape, brought in forensic teams, and even used an unmarked car as a decoy for Michael's vehicle. Then they called Dalia and told her, "Ma'am, there's been an incident at your residence. You need to come immediately." When she arrived, wearing gym clothes and holding her phone, cameras rolled. An officer approached her and said the words that would become viral. "Your husband's been killed, ma'am. He's been shot." Dalia gasped, screamed, collapsed in tears. It looked like the performance of a lifetime, until minutes later, when detectives brought her to the station and revealed the truth. They opened the interrogation room door and in walked Michael DiPolito, alive. The moment was pure shock. Dahlia froze, speechless. Then she tried to pivot, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that someone must have set her up. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversations, the money, the timing, the calmness in her voice when she ordered her husband's death like it was a home repair job. Michael, visibly shaken, told police, "I gave this woman everything. She wanted me dead for it." When the footage aired later that year, first on Cops and then on 2020, it exploded across America. Millions watched as Dahlia's calm, calculating demeanor contrasted with her hysterical denial once caught. She became the face of the modern femme fatale, poised, articulate, utterly unfeeling. The courtroom turned into a media circus. Prosecutors painted her as a master manipulator, a woman who used her looks and charm to get whatever she wanted. Her defense argued entrapment, claiming the police had staged a reality show more than a criminal case. But the jury didn't buy it. In 2011, Dahlia DiPolito was convicted of solicitation to commit first-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. However, her lawyers appealed, and thanks to procedural errors and questions about jury bias, her conviction was overturned twice. She faced multiple retrials, each time spinning a slightly different story, that it was a prank, that she was pressured, that it was all a mistake. In her third and final trial in 2017, the evidence was again played before the jury, that unforgettable 5,000% sure line echoing through the courtroom. She was convicted once more and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Dahlia DiPolito's story has since become legend, not because it was the most violent crime, but because it was so coldly orchestrated. She didn't pull a trigger or swing a knife. She simply decided someone else should. She calculated every move, rehearsed every lie, and performed every emotion, until reality caught up with her. Psychologists have called her a classic narcissist, obsessed with control and image. Even behind bars, she continues to insist she was set up. But those who've watched the tapes see something different. A woman who smiled while signing her husband's death warrant. There's a reason this story never fades from public memory.
It plays like a dark comedy of errors, except for one truth.
If not for that undercover cop, Michael DiPolito would be dead. A staged murder, a real betrayal, and a performance so convincing that even her tears looked rehearsed. When Dahlia said she was 5,000% sure, she wasn't exaggerating. She really meant it. And she nearly got away with it. The Japanese Black Widow, the Chizako Kakehi case. In Japan, a country known for order, discipline, and societal respect, the story of Chizako Kakehi sent shockwaves across the nation. Dubbed the Black Widow of Japan, Kakehi's crimes weren't the impulsive acts of rage or passion often seen in domestic homicides. They were cold, calculated, and executed with a patience that made the word chilling almost an understatement. For decades, Chizako lived a life that seemed ordinary. A widow, polite, respectable, and unassuming. Many who knew her described a quiet, courteous woman who embodied traditional Japanese values. But beneath this facade was a woman who used the trust of her partners as a weapon. Over the course of at least 6 murders between 2007 and 2013, Kakehi allegedly poisoned her spouses and lovers, amassing millions in insurance payouts and inheritance. The method was deceptively simple, but lethal. Cyanide, a fast-acting poison that she carefully concealed in drinks or medication. Friends and family believed they were offering her hospitality,
or sharing a casual meal. No one suspected that death could be in the teacup, hidden behind a polite smile. Her victims were often elderly men, successful, vulnerable, and trusting. They had no reason to suspect the woman they cared for, sometimes romantically, would betray them so completely. Insurance policies were in her favor, often written shortly before their deaths, making the pattern both profitable and suspicious. Investigators pieced together a horrifying sequence. Each death initially appeared natural or accidental. Heart attacks, sudden collapses, the perfect cover. But as patterns emerged, authorities noticed commonalities. The victims were all connected to Kakehi, and financial gains frequently followed their deaths. A breakthrough came in 2013 when toxicology tests revealed cyanide in the blood and organs of several victims. Investigators launched a full-scale inquiry.
The quiet widow of decades was unmasked as the orchestrator of death. During interrogation, Kakehi remained calm, almost detached. Her demeanor fascinated criminologists and horrified the public. She didn't panic, didn't sob, didn't plead. She answered questions with calculated precision, carefully choosing words, maintaining composure, and never betraying emotion. The trial was a spectacle. Japanese courts rarely see such brazen domestic murder cases. Evidence included phone records, financial transactions, cyanide traces, and eyewitness testimony of her administering substances to her victims. Prosecutors painted a portrait of a woman who viewed human life as secondary to her pursuit of wealth and comfort. Kakehi's defense argued against the allegations, claiming lack of intent and citing her social standing and personality as inconsistent with criminal behavior. But the prosecution methodically dismantled every claim. The cyanide traces, the timing of deaths, and her repeated financial gains left no room for doubt. In 2017, Chisako Kakehi was convicted of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to death, a sentence confirmed in later appeals. The ruling sent a message across Japan about the dangers of hidden domestic crimes, particularly those motivated by greed and cold calculation. What makes the Kakehi case especially disturbing is not just the number of victims, but the methodical psychology behind it. Experts noted her ability to mask cruelty behind civility, to manipulate affection, and to exploit trust. She wasn't driven by anger or revenge. She was driven by calculated self-interest, patience, and the quiet thrill of evading suspicion. Her story sparked widespread media attention, books and documentaries, often highlighting the contrast between her public image as a polite widow and the reality of a serial poisoner. The term Black Widow became almost literal, a woman who drew in life only to deliver death. Beyond the sensationalism, the Kakehi case serves as a grim reminder of a universal truth. Evil doesn't always wear the mask of rage or violence. Sometimes it wears civility, respectability, and even charm. Kakehi's crimes were a lesson in patience, planning, and exploitation, showing how easily trust can be weaponized when combined with intellect and immorality. For the families of her victims, the sentence brought closure, but not healing. The fact that someone could so calmly plan and execute multiple murders in a society known for discipline and social vigilance left lasting trauma. Psychologists studying Kakehi emphasize her detachment and utilitarian view of human life. She is considered one of the most notorious female serial killers of the 21st century, not just for the number of deaths, but for the sophistication, patience,
and manipulative intelligence demonstrated over years. Shizuko Kakehi's story is chilling because it demonstrates the quiet, undetectable nature of modern domestic serial crimes. There was no screaming, no chaos, no immediate suspicion. Death came quietly, methodically, often from a trusted hand. Her life behind polite smiles serves as a stark reminder. Evil sometimes comes not with violence or anger, but with patience, charm, and a deadly plan.
A Fatal Dance, the Ashley Benefield story. The world of ballet is one of grace, discipline, and perfection. Every movement is precise, every step rehearsed, and every performance a delicate balance of strength, beauty, and control. To outsiders, it seems like a world of elegance and poise. But in September 2020 in Florida, that very world collided with violence, revealing that even in the most disciplined lives, darkness can lie beneath the surface. This is the chilling story of Ashley Benefield, a former ballerina whose life of art, precision, and discipline took a shocking turn into tragedy. Ashley grew up surrounded by the rigorous world of dance. From a young age, she was trained to endure, to focus, and to achieve perfection in every movement. Years of discipline molded her into someone who understood control in its most physical and psychological forms. Ballet was more than art. It was a way of life, a lens through which she approached every decision. Yet, as it sometimes happens with high achievers, the very skills that made her a meticulous dancer also shaped a personality capable of intense focus and decisive action, qualities that, when combined with domestic tensions, could turn fatal. After leaving professional ballet, Ashley appeared to have a life that many envied. She married Douglas Benefield, a man described by friends as caring, steady, and devoted. Together, they maintained the facade of a conventional, happy life in suburban Florida. On the surface, their marriage seemed ordinary. Family dinners, community involvement, and the shared pursuit of the American suburban dream. But domestic life often hides complexity beneath its surface, and in Ashley's case, stress, financial strain, and unspoken conflicts quietly festered. The evening of September 27, 2020 changed everything. At the home of Ashley's mother, an argument escalated, though the exact details remain partially unclear. Neighbors would later describe hearing raised voices and the occasional thud, but none suspected the catastrophe about to unfold. Douglas was shot, a single lethal bullet that ended his life in an instant. Authorities arrived to find the scene tense and chaotic, with Ashley present and in custody. Investigators immediately began to piece together what had happened. From the outside, it could have been a domestic dispute gone tragically wrong, yet closer examination revealed a more complex narrative. Evidence suggested a combination of pre-existing marital tension, psychological strain, and possible financial motivation. Court documents would later reference disputes over household finances, custody considerations, and unreported domestic conflicts that likely contributed to the tragic outcome. Prosecutors built a case suggesting that Ashley's actions were intentional, though not premeditated in the traditional first-degree murder sense. They argued that her background, a woman accustomed to discipline, precision, and control, allowed her to act decisively in a moment of perceived threat or frustration. Her years in ballet had honed not just physical skill, but the psychological capacity to remain calm and deliberate under pressure, a chilling quality when applied to real-life conflict. The defense painted a different picture.
Ashley was portrayed as a frightened spouse, trapped in an escalating domestic argument, acting in a moment of panic. They emphasized her history of discipline and perseverance, framing her decisive actions as an instinctive response rather than cold calculation. Experts called this reactive aggression, a sudden, intense response to perceived danger, amplified by psychological stressors and situational triggers. The trial captivated Florida and eventually the nation. Reporters and social media dissected every detail. The background of a former ballerina, now accused of manslaughter. The eerie contrast between elegance and violence, and the complexities of domestic relationships that often hide beneath polished veneers. Witnesses described Ashley as calm, articulate, and even composed during court appearances, a reflection perhaps of the discipline instilled in her from years of ballet. Forensic evidence played a key role. The trajectory of the bullet, the positioning of both individuals, and the absence of signs of a struggle suggested that Ashley acted with intent, but not necessarily malice aforethought. Testimonies from friends and family painted a picture of a marriage that had deteriorated over years of unresolved conflict, financial pressure, and emotional strain. Psychologists noted that high-achieving individuals, especially those trained to maintain poise under pressure, can sometimes convert stress into decisive action, a trait that can become dangerous in emotionally charged situations. Ultimately, in 2024, Ashley Benefield was convicted of manslaughter. The court determined that her actions were intentional, but did not constitute first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with additional probationary terms upon release. While the verdict brought a sense of legal closure, it could not undo the profound loss experienced by Douglas's family or erase the psychological ripple effects within their community. The psychology behind the Ashley Benefield case remains deeply compelling. It demonstrates how discipline, control, and high achievement, qualities often celebrated in society, can, under pressure, manifest in deadly decisiveness. Her years of ballet training had honed her ability to act with precision under stress, a skill tragically misapplied in a domestic context. Combined with financial tension, personal frustration, and marital conflict, these factors culminated in a fatal incident that continues to intrigue criminologists and psychologists alike. Experts point out that Ashley's story is a cautionary tale about the complexity of domestic violence and the hidden layers of human behavior. It highlights how external appearances, a polished career, a disciplined lifestyle, and suburban normalcy can conceal profound emotional and psychological turmoil. In many ways, it reminds us that domestic environments are unpredictable, and even individuals with seemingly extraordinary self-control are not immune to moments of fatal action. For the community and Douglas's family, the case remains a tragic reminder of the fragility of trust within intimate relationships. The juxtaposition of Ashley's past as a dedicated artist and her actions on that fatal night underscores the unpredictable interplay between human ambition, emotional strain, and the potential for violence in domestic life. Ultimately, the Ashley Benefield case is more than a story of crime. It is a profound exploration of human psychology, marital tension, and the ways in which discipline and precision can be misapplied under pressure. It serves as a stark reminder that the darkest acts can emerge even in the most seemingly ordinary lives, and that the line between control and chaos is sometimes alarmingly thin.